Hey, Sven here. I am so happy. One of the coolest features of Make, which I've basically been waiting for years. It was introduced, very quietly and secretly. No one noticed. And that's why no one is talking about it. And I'm talking about the invocation of sub-scenarios. And now you might say, yeah, that's been around for a while. Yes, you're right, but the big difference, and that was now with the introduction of the agents, that had to be implemented. That is, I can call a sub-scenario and wait until I get the result back. So, in a way, it's a subroutine call. And that has changed everything for me regarding my scenarios. You can already see one in the background here. I will get into what makes this special in a moment. And, it's simply that your entire Make scenario becomes much more maintainable, much easier to understand, and much more. And how the whole thing works, and how you can, for example, modify an existing scenario, I'll show you now in this video. So stay tuned, and you'll understand how you can take your Make activities to a whole new level. I'm Sven, I'm an entrepreneur, and I've been involved with quality and process optimization for over 33 years. Not just in business, but in all areas of life. And much of what I can do today, I've learned through experience, through trial and error, and I know what really works. And with my videos, I want to show you how you can profitably use intelligent process automation for yourself in your business. And if you're not quite sure where to start, then just book an appointment with me. You'll find the link for that down here in the description. But now let's get started. It's about the following. If you have a scenario like this one here, this is our big content marketing machine. A machine, or rather a part of it. Then in such a scenario, you very often have recurring functionality. So, for example, I have here 3 spots. I'll arrange it so that you can see them all at a glance. I have 3 spots here where I generate an image prompt, then make the prompt safe, meaning I remove any special characters, and then I call Flex in this case to generate an image, which I then download here and further process. I have the same thing here again, and I have the same thing here again. And now imagine the following. Now I want to replace Flex here with GPT image 1, for example. Then, in this scenario alone, I have to go into 3 places and modify it. And not just modify it in terms of changing the content. If I now take a different version of Flex, then it's probably just a JSON document. But if I want to use a different image generator, then I actually have to completely rebuild everything. And that's really annoying because I don't just have this scenario, but I also have, 50 other scenarios where the image generator is called in the same way. And wouldn't it be cool if I had it in just one single place and only needed to change that one place and everything else stays the same? And that's exactly what these sub-scenarios are for. And as I said, I think it's an amazing feature because it just provides so much clarity in your scenarios. So I'm not going to rebuild this here, but what would I do here? Just to give you a better understanding. To create the image and then wait for this image to be finished. And then continue to use the URL, like uploading it somewhere else or something like that. That's the actual function I need. And then I also have this safe image prompt here. This is also helpful, because sometimes it happens that if there's a special character in the prompts that are automatically generated, it crashes. Then there's an error message and your scenario crashes. So that's why it makes sense to, for example, outsource this part. And then, instead of having this part multiple times here, always just call this subprogram, this sub-scenario. I've now set up the whole thing a bit simpler. Namely, here in this scenario. What do we have here? First of all, I've simply inserted a variable here to define the image prompt. I've written in a dolly image that is supposed to be generated. And then, you can of course imagine, instead of this variable here, these image prompts could somehow be generated. Yes, through. Either you write them in like I did, or you have a table where you read them from, or you generate them with JGBT, or however you prefer. Then I have another variable here for setting the API key for Flex. And now I've basically done something similar here, as in that other scenario. I have a section here where I need 5 modules, not only to generate this image, but also to further process it. And because I want to generate this image once in 16 by 9 and then maybe the same image again in 1 by 1, I basically have the exact same content here twice, with a single difference, namely that in my JSON document, I wrote 1 by 1 instead of 16 by 9. And now, as I already mentioned, yes, we are using, basically, we see it up here. We are now using Flax Pro 1.1 Ultra, and if I replace it with, I don't know, eventually version 2, then I have to go into all the individual scenarios, into all the calls of Flex, and change it everywhere. But I only want to change it once. And that's why I outsource this part here. The part that is reusable, I outsource it into a subroutine, so to speak, into a sub-scenario. And I've already prepared that here. So I have put this part into its own scenario. And what do we see here? Of course, I have to set the API key again. I need to secure the image prompt accordingly so that there are no special characters in it. Then I call the Flax generator. Wait 15 seconds because I know the image is ready. Within 10 seconds, I have a bit of a safety buffer in there. And in the end, I have the result. And to be able to call this sub-scenario from the main, I need to make a few preparations. And it starts with, I'll go over here. Like this. It starts with me having to tell the scenario what data is actually coming into the scenario. And to be able to do that, I need these scenario inputs and outputs here. And to actually be able to call it, I go into the schedule settings and select on demand here. And when I do that, this clock changes to this symbol with the arrow, indicating that something is coming in here. That, of course, can only work if it is activated, but we don't need that yet. That's why I'm not activating it yet. And now I define the variables. That should come in here as input. That means, basically, it starts with, yes, the image prompt. The image prompt. It comes from somewhere, yes. This is the prompt to generate an image. This text will be displayed. Later, I'll show you that. This is tag text. We don't need a default value, but we definitely need it to be required. And actually, we're already done now. But what I want to do additionally here is to use this sub-scenario for different formats, like 16 to 9, 1 to 1, 9 to 16. And that's why I'm adding another item. And now I say, image, format. And this is the aspect ratio of the image, or maybe even, since I'm making it a selection, please kindly select the aspect ratio for the image. And this is not type text, but we will use type. Select here. And now I can add different selections here. So that means first I do 16 to 9, then 1 to 1, 1 to 1, and then 9 to 16, and they will appear as options. And now you can imagine if I want to say photorealistic or illustration, then I could essentially control more parameters externally. So that means every time this scenario is called, these data must be passed and can then be processed in here, as you know, when you use a variable from a previous module. And we need them here in this safe image prompt. I have this function in here, and for now, I just have XXX written here. And now to access these input values, you need to click on these. curly brackets in the selection. And now we actually see image format and image prompt. So these are the scenario inputs that I just created. So here it is, the image prompt. Save. Here in this flux, it is the save image prompt, which I already have here. So I don't need to change it. But here, we want to use the format now. And this format is also in here again. And that is the image format. So in this way, I can now control these parameters from the outside. And now we want to return the result, namely this URL that is generated here. Yes, the one that comes out here, back to the scenario call. And that's why we need the scenario outputs here in addition to the input. And if we add an element here again, we say, for example, this is the image prompt. Image prompt. Nonsense, image prompt. Image URL, of course. The URL. And this is a temporary URL of the generated image. So this is again of tag text. There's no default value required, yes. And to be able to return that, I need the scenario return output from the module. I simply attached it here at the end. And it now immediately reads these outputs that I have specified here. And now I can say here, okay, what is the URL? This is from this get result. This variable sample. So with that, our sub-scenario is now complete. That means, to summarize briefly, this is the call. Here the input parameters come in, which I can then process here. And here at the end, I then return the output parameter, the URL. And to call this from the other module, I also need to make a few changes there. That means I save this here for now. Then go back over here. So, and what we want here now is we set the image prompt, the API key. We don't need that here anymore. So we can basically delete the module. And now we have this create wax image get result. These are exactly the three functions or the three modules that I can now replace. That means I can simply delete them now. And then add the scenarios here. That's the old one. Start a scenario. Yes, we don't need that anymore. Instead, we need call a sub-scenario. By the way, I assume this will also be removed soon. Call a sub-scenario, and I will insert it here now. So, and when I call this up here, scenario, then I have to search for it accordingly. What did I name this thing? Sub, then it starts easier. Generate flux image, there it is. So, and now you see, now by selecting this scenario, it reads the parameters from the sub-scenario that I can pass here. And that means when I click in here, I can now pass the image prompt as a variable. And for the format, I can now say, okay, I want 16 by 9. You remember, we set that as an option. There. And this is the setting that didn't exist before, namely that I wait for the result of the scenario. That means, when something happens here, I call up the scenario. It is executed. The result comes back, and then I have the URL that I can continue to work with. So, let's click OK. And up here, you can still see that it is inactive. That means I couldn't call it up yet. Click on Save. And now I have to make a change here, namely when I go to download image. I have to go in here now. And now you see that this output, namely the image URL from this called scenario, is also offered to me here as a result. So that was everything. With that, I've basically already completed it, uploading it to Google Drive here. That's my example of further processing the image. And now we'll do exactly the same thing here again. That means we'll remove this again. And then duplicate it here. Paste it here. And the only thing I'm changing now is that I say 1-to-1. The prompt should be the same, for sure. So, and here for the download, we also need the image URL again, and I will further process it in my Google Drive. Accordingly, once here as image 1-to-1 and in front as image 16:9. So, and now, you can imagine exactly, I never have to change anything in this call here, unless I would insert another parameter in the sub-scenario. That means if now, in this sub-scenario, I go over again, I would replace flux with GPT image 1 here, or I would need, I don't know, flux version 2, here now, because it might have just been released. Then I have to change it here and nowhere else. So, to actually be able to execute the whole thing now, I have to activate this on demand, live. And then, I save the whole thing again. And then we go back to our main scenario. And if I start it now and haven't made any mistakes, then it should start running here. Then the sub-scenario is called here. Here it waits. And because it takes a while in the other year, we just have to hold on here until those 15 seconds are over, and then the scenario continues. Okay, so let's start the whole thing. Run once. The scenario is being called. And now, it just takes a while. I'll take a short break. It has finished running. The image is being uploaded. Now it's being called again. And the same thing happens again. Yes, and the second image is also being uploaded. Let's go over to the drive and see what's going on. Yes, the two images are there. 16:9. Okay, these aren't melted clocks. Flax obviously can't do that quite right. But it's still a dolly style, I would say. So, and now, I could do the following. I go back to my big content machine. And now I could simply replace all these elements here and be done. And that's what I find so cool, because with the image, that's just an idea now. There might be a dozen other things, for example, something like this, where I create a carousel that also calls multiple functions. That means I input something, have a function called create carousel, get the result back, and much more. So, you can now think of anything. What can I outsource into subfunctions? Make my make scenarios clean, maintainable, reusable, and in the end, really super simple. So, I think it's great. My new favorite function in Make. If you liked it, thanks for your like and for subscribing. See you next time. Bye.